Alright, let's cover some common ASP.NET Web API interview questions and their answers. Basic concepts. Q. What is ASP.NET Web API? A. ASP.NET Web API is a framework for building HTTP-based RESTful services on top of the .NET framework. It simplifies the process of creating web services that can be consumed by a wide range of clients, including browsers, mobile devices, and other applications. Q. What is REST? Representational state transfer. A. REST is an architectural style for designing networked applications. It relies on a stateless client-server cacheable communications protocol, and it uses standard HTTP methods to perform operations on resources. Q. What are the key principles of REST? A. Client-server architecture, statelessness, cacheability, uniform interface, using HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, DELETE. Layered system. Code on demand, optional. Q. What HTTP methods are commonly used in Web API, and what do they do? A. GET. Retrieves a resource. POST. Creates a new resource. PUT. Updates an existing resource. DELETE. Deletes a resource. Patch. Partially updates an existing resource. Q. What are the advantages of using ASP.NET Web API? A. Platform independence. Lightweight and fast. Easy to build RESTful services. Supports various data formats, JSON, XML. Integration with modern front-end frameworks. Cross-platform capabilities when using ASP.NET Core Web API. Implementation and features. Q. How do you create a Web API controller? A. You create a class that inherits from AP Controller or controller base in ASP.NET Core, and add public methods, action methods, that respond to HTTP requests. Q. How do you handle routing in Web API? A. Routing is handled using route templates, which define the URL patterns that map to specific action methods. Attributes like route, HTTP GET, HTTP POST, etc. are used to define routes. Q. What is content negotiation in Web API? A. Content negotiation is the process of selecting the best representation of a resource to return to the client based on the client's preferences, e.g., accept header. Q. How do you serialize and deserialize data in Web API? A. Web API uses media formatters to serialize and deserialize data. By default, it supports JSON and XML. You can also create custom media formatters. Q. How do you handle errors in Web API? A. You can handle errors using exception filters, HTTP status codes, and custom error responses. Q. What is dependency injection in Web API? A. Dependency injection is a design pattern that allows you to provide dependencies to a class rather than having the class create them. ASP.NET Web API, especially ASP.NET Core Web API, has built-in support for dependency injection. Q. How do you secure a Web API? A. You can secure a Web API using various authentication and authorization mechanisms, such as authentication, basic authentication, JWT JSON Web Tokens, OAuth, authorization, role-based authorization, policy-based authorization. Q. How do you handle versioning in Web API? A. Versioning can be handled through URI versioning, e.g., /API/v1/products, query string versioning, e.g., /API/products version equals 1. Header versioning, e.g., custom X version header. Media type versioning. Q. What are action filters? A. Action filters are attributes that can be applied to action methods or controllers to add cross-cutting concerns, such as logging, caching, or authentication. Q. What is CORS, and why is it important in Web API? A. CORS, cross-origin resource sharing, is a mechanism that allows a web page to make requests to a different domain than the one that served the web page. It's important for Web API because it enables cross-domain communication. Q. How do you implement logging in Web API? A. Common logging libraries include Serilog, Nlog, and the built-in iLogger interface. Logging can be implemented via action filters or within the layers of the application. Q. How do you test Web API? A. Testing can be done using unit tests, testing individual components, integration tests, testing the interaction between components, tools like Postman, or Swagger/OpenAPI,